All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the 10th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference presented by the University of Idaho's Center for Excellence in Teaching. The session today is one of 60-hour-long sessions we have through Friday, February 15th. I'm John Callis, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm an instructional designer at California University of Pennsylvania. As a reminder, all of our sessions are closed captioned. To view the captions, simply click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Today's session is Beyond the Buzz, Recent Research on Hot Topics in Online Learning and Quality Assurance. Our presenter is Barbra Burch, Manager of Research and Development at Quality Matters. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Barbra. I'm sure she can give a brief introduction of herself and start her presentation.
Thanks, John. I would like to say good morning to everyone, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. I know for those of you who are on Pacific time, it's actually pretty early for you, and this may be the first thing that you're doing along with your cup of coffee. So what I'm going to do is, it's hard for me to watch the chat all the time while I'm presenting. So what I'd like to do is share my screen with the PowerPoint, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to attempt to stop sharing the screen at a couple of points during the presentation so that I can take questions, because there are certainly a few distinct parts to the presentation. So I'm just going to get set to share my screen, and then we'll be off and rolling. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can hear and see my screen. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm going to warn you that there are some text-heavy slides that I'm going to share in this. But after all, this is research. So one of the reasons for all the text is I want you to have links to the different references that I'm citing, because we're only going to be scratching the surface on those. And you may want to actually look at the full articles behind each of those references. So to introduce myself a little bit more, I'm Barbra Burch, the Manager of Research and Development at Quality Matters. And Quality Matters is a nonprofit organization that works with organizations that do online and blended learning. And we are probably best known for our efforts around online course design, because we have a rubric for different standards for quality online course design. But we also work with online programs now, and we've gotten a little bit into the delivery area as well. So why is QM interested in research? Well, one reason is that we update our rubric every few years, and the rubric is based on best practices and supported by research. So when we go about that process of updating it, we're looking at what is new in terms of best practices, what has experience shown, but also what is new according to what the research is showing. So that's one reason why we tend to track the research. Another reason is that we have been in business for over a decade at this point. And so a lot of organizations that are involved with Quality Matters have been tracking their use of Quality Matters, looking to see what's happening in their online and blended courses, and how all of the stakeholders are impacted by that. What's happening with the instructors, with the staff, with the students. And some of them go so far as to do formal research studies on what their implementation has shown and looks like. So that's another reason that we're interested in research. We want to see what is happening with the implementation of Quality Matters. Okay, so some of today's hot topics. There are so many different topics that are being written about and researched in online education, and many people with different types of expertise have knowledge and opinions about them. So what I wanted to do today was just look at a few of the hot topics. So let's see. The first one I'm going to cover is open educational resources. Secondly, I'll talk about adaptive learning. And then thirdly, just the big umbrella topic of what works online. All right, starting with open educational resources. There is new information on an almost daily basis, I feel, on open educational resources or OERs. And one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at research and reading these journal articles or even articles that are written about journal articles is that it's very important to start with the definition, because you may have something different in your mind when you're reading the research than what the researcher is actually using as their definition. So this is the definition that I have been operating under for open educational resources. Teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. Open educational resources include full courses, course materials, etc. Okay, so the definition is very interesting to me, because usually what I think of when I think of OERs is I think of a biology 101 instructor going and looking to see what material that's open educational resource that they can incorporate into their course. But actually, there can be full courses that are OERs. So I think that's kind of interesting. Okay, so why is this a hot topic? All right, I would say the number one reason this is a hot topic is because OERs are certainly a way to cut costs. You know, everybody knows that the cost of a commercially produced textbook that's often required for a class can cost $100, $200, and it's a significant expense for a lot of students. And not only is it a shame that it's expensive, but it may even prevent students from actually getting the textbook. So one way for instructors to ensure that their students are going to have the content from day one is to go ahead and use open educational resources that can be used free of charge. Another reason why I would say this is a hot topic is it's something that's tangible that can be fairly quickly implemented. Some of you may be aware that the state of Virginia has a mandate for its colleges and universities to create guidelines for using open educational resources. So those schools need to do that. Another thing I'll mention is that the federal government has a multi-million-dollar pilot going on right now for an open textbook project out of the University of California at Davis. So definitely a hot topic. All right, so what is the impact of open educational resources on student learning? Because after all, nobody would like to use these resources if there's going to be some kind of a negative consequence on student learning. And then how can quality be assured? So very closely tied to the impact on student learning is the question of quality. So I'm going to get into some of the resources that we have about that and what we've learned so far. Okay, there have been numerous studies done in the last few years on OER and student outcomes of using OER. And a lot of these studies include the perceptions of the students and the instructors, just asking students and instructors, what did they think about the quality of the open educational resources? So in the next several slides, I'm going to point out a couple of noteworthy references, but I'll begin by cutting to the chase, okay, with what we're finding. Some of the studies that have been done so far have shown higher student grades and pass rates, completion rates for the course, and lower failing and withdrawal rates. So there is some hopefulness as a result of what some of the studies are showing. Other studies are showing that there's no significant difference in student outcomes as a result of using the OER. That also is actually hopeful because people know that they're not going to be negatively impacting students as a result of using OER. And then the research that's been done on student and instructors' perceptions of quality with OER is that both tend to perceive it as being as good or better than traditional textbooks. Now, you have to take it with a grain of salt. One thing that often happens in educational research is the intrusion of confounding variables. And I would definitely say that any study that's looked at perceptions on behalf of students or instructors related to the quality of open educational resources, a confounding variable for students is just the fact that they don't cost anything. So that's obviously going to play into them feeling good about it, and it may even get sort of mixed up with their perception of its quality. From the instructor's standpoint, a confounding variable is just the fact that the students may have access to it on day one because they're not sitting back and waiting to see, am I really going to need to spend for the textbook for this course? What is the instructor teaching content-wise? Do I need the backup or the supplement of the textbook? So from an instructor's perspective, they could be very happy with open educational resources because the students are using them from day one. Okay, in terms of quality assurance of open educational resources, the research really is in its infancy and needs refining, but it's showing that OERs can both save money and be effective instructional material for achieving desired student outcomes. One of the things that if you are an instructor and you're thinking about using OERs, you want to ensure the quality of it, is to go to repositories like Merlot or the OER Commons. The advantage of that, quality-wise, is that people are not, in most cases, just uploading resources and materials to those repositories. There is some type of vetting of the content in them. So for example, with Merlot, I know that there's an editorial board that includes subject matter experts, and they are reviewing the content before it's actually put online. Another resource that I've got a link for here is something that Quality Matters has, which just gives a little guidance. It lists some of the repositories like Merlot or OER Commons, but in addition to that, suggests some of the questions that you might ask in terms of quality to make sure that a particular piece of content is actually a good quality material and is going to help you in your course. So questions like whether the content is current, whether it contributes to the course's stated learning objectives, whether there are different perspectives and breadth and depth evident in the content. Okay, so in terms of research references, this article from 2017 by Fisher, Ernst, and Mason, and I'll give the full reference in a future slide, looked at the average ratings of a number of different quality criterion. So it was actually reviewing the textbooks for their quality. So what they did was they looked at the criteria of comprehensiveness, accuracy, relevance, clarity, consistency, and so forth. And in terms of results, they found overall that these criteria were largely present and the overall rating was of high quality in this particular study. Interestingly, the highest rated of those criteria were grammar and consistency of the OER, and the lowest rated criteria were interface and comprehensiveness. So felt like that was kind of interesting. All right, a few more. One of the great resources for research on open educational resources is something called the Open Education Group Open Education Resources Research Fellows, which is a real mouthful. But they have been developed very recently, and they have done quite a few studies that are listed at that link. So I think that's a great research resource if you're looking to find more information. I'll also mention Hilton, who did a synthesis of the results of 16 different studies on OERs, and found in that study that there were the same outcomes for students using OERs as from traditional textbooks. So that's a great study. One aside that I'll give here is that something that is always helpful when you're trying in a time-sensitive way to look at a lot of research is to look for meta-analyses or syntheses of this type, because it will pull the results from a whole bunch of different studies, and you'll get the Reader's Digest version in a way, also with the analysis of the author of the article that is the synthesis or meta-analysis. So it's a nice compilation of research on any topic. Another of the studies I wanted to mention is Weller and colleagues. This study found that OER increases student engagement. So that is something that's very important, and engagement has been linked to course completion. This study did not find increase in retention of students, but at least at a minimum, it did find that students were more engaged. All right, another study that I wanted to mention is this one by Colvard and colleagues. Colvard did a large-scale study, and it showed improved grades and decreased DFWs. So that is interesting, because that is something that some of the other studies don't show as much of, as an increase in course completion. And another thing that was shown in this study is that Pell Grant students and part-time students showed even greater improvement than other students. So I think that's an important result. And then I am not even going to try the name. John Gianni possibly is the study from 2017. And this study focused on student perceptions. And like I was talking about earlier, and found that students both tend to use OERs at a high rate when their courses have them, and they appreciate them. They like to use OERs as opposed to commercial textbooks. Okay, a few more studies for you on OERs. GRU did a study with a large urban multi-campus community college near Washington, D.C., which showed moderate positive correlation of using OERs with student grades. Fisher, this is another study from Fisher, looking at student completion of courses and achievement in terms of grades. And this study also looked at enrollment intensity, both during and after semesters in which OER was used, and found that students were basically taking more courses or more credit hours when they were using OERs. Now, that's something you can't say that was necessarily caused by the OERs, but it is interesting, and there might need to be some more research along those lines. Okay, and then just a couple of more studies for you. This last one with Fisher is the full reference from that first article I mentioned. All right, let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen for just a second and see if there are any questions from you. Yes, I am going to share the link that will get you to the PowerPoint. All righty. No other questions. I'll go ahead and share again. Okay, so moving right along here, one more. Okay, moving on to adaptive learning. All right, so here's the definition of adaptive learning that I like to work with. Machine learning that tailors itself to the learner based on their progress through course content and provides resources to learners when they appear to need them most. So when they appear to need them most. Something that's interesting to me about this definition is that it explains how adaptive learning falls under the personalized learning umbrella. I think a lot of times that those two terms get used interchangeably, but really what adaptive learning is a tool to accomplish personalized learning. So it's the machine way to do things. So, why is adaptive learning a hot topic? It's a hot topic because of its potential to personalize learning. I think that's something that everybody is very tied into nowadays, how to make the learning, what's being taught, very student-centered and personalized. And, you know, just because there is a class of students, whether it's face-to-face, for a portion of the class or online, you want to personalize learning. And because online learning has been growing so much in terms of enrollment of students, that really makes this a nice moment for adaptive learning, because we can use the technology to do that online. Okay, so we want to look at what the impact is on student learning up till now, what we know about it, and how can quality be assured. All right. Well, I would say with adaptive learning that we're still in relative infancy in terms of using it and research on exactly how it works, but there has been some research so far. And I would say that there have been some positive results from an early study that is discussed in this article by Phil Hill about adaptive learning that uses something called intelligent tutoring systems. And what this is, it's a layered system of adaptive learning that involves sort of an outer loop that selects learning tasks in an adaptive manner just based on an assessment of students' strengths and weaknesses. So a quiz that would ask certain questions about the content and then would give different questions and different prompts depending on the way that students answered. And so students could take different paths with that content. But what an intelligent tutoring system would do is then follow up with guidance for each of the steps within the task. So it's sort of like an online tutor that would step in addition to the student being steered to a different type of question or a different type of content. So the finding of this research was that using intelligent tutoring systems can produce moderate, statistically significant mean effect sizes compared to like a large group, large lecture, face-to-face instruction, or even individual computer-based instruction where the student is working on their own with their texts. But the results did not show a statistically significant mean effect when compared to small group human instruction or individual tutoring. So in other words, basically to me, what it means is that using the intelligent tutoring system is adaptive learning's answer to like small group, face-to-face learning or one-on-one type of instruction. So I think that's really interesting. This second study that I'm going to mention basically is that I got to it through this article in the Chronicle Focus by Michael Feldstein. Oh, I'm sorry, no, this first one is the SRI International study, and it talked about lessons that were learned as a result of a few different studies. And then this Chronicle article by Michael Feldstein discussed them. And basically, the research showed that adaptive learning did not have a discernible impact on grades. It took a number of different schools, and I think a few of the schools showed that there was some kind of a small bump in student grades, but that there was no impact on student completion. Other findings from the study was that community colleges, the students there had high levels of satisfaction. Something about the adaptive learning felt good to them and felt like it was high quality, but only 1/3 at four-year institutions did. So the Feldstein article is a really good one to read because it talks about some of the difficulties with educational research and having comparable groups of students in a study, and gets into another one of the problems that we always have with getting definitive formal research, which is the ethical problem of withholding some kind of a treatment that you suspect is maybe helpful or could be helpful for a certain group of people. So I think that's a really good one to check out. Let's see. Preliminary research that is shown in this article, Rethinking Higher Ed, is really good. They found some very promising results from the use of adaptive learning. They did something at Arizona State University with a product by a company called Newton. And with that, they saw an 18% increase in student pass rates and a 47% decrease in withdrawals in math courses. They were actually able to determine that the use of the adaptive learning saved them an estimated $12 million. So that's something that always gets asked is a return on investment. So that's kind of a good study to read about. Then there was also a study with tutorials that were presented using technology called by Smart Sparrow in an engineering course at the University of New South Wales. And that led to a 55% decline in dropout rates. So those are good ones. And then there's this article on adaptive quizzes, or I'm sorry, learning to adapt by Carl Stromsheim. And that found a slight positive effect on student grades. And this last article on adaptive quizzes found that student scores did not increase significantly, but students' motivation and engagement in the courses did increase. Okay. This report, the first one here, harkens back to the information I mentioned from SRI earlier, with modest but significant positive effects on student scores, better than traditional lectures, slightly better course grades in the students who used the adaptive learning versus the non-adaptive software in their fully online courses, but no significant impact on course completion. And then this last one here from McGraw-Hill, what they used was something called the Assessment and Learning and Knowledge Spaces, or ALEX, Adaptive Learning System, and that was designed for science and math courses. And what they did here was they looked at community college students and compared similar groups of learners. And they actually did find something very positive, that the students using ALEX passed their courses at higher rates. So increased course completion there, which is great. Okay, the question of assuring quality, I think we basically, from what I said before, I think we are still wanting some more research on adaptive learning. But I would say the most promising adaptive learning that I've seen in the research uses those intelligent tutoring systems. So I think it's a tool that can be used well, but I would say that the jury is still out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing again for a second and just see if there were any questions in the chat. No? Okay. Share again. Improve my toggling skills with this presentation. Okay, so I've shared about a couple of these hot topics, but I think for all of us in online education, we're pretty sold on online education as being a very promising and helpful format for education, and it certainly isn't going to go anywhere. But what we really want to know is what actually works. And, that's such a large question. It tends to get broken down into smaller bits. But actually, what works in online education is very much related to what works in education overall. And so I wanted to mention a little bit about where Quality Matters comes into that picture. We have quality course design rubrics and quality online program criteria. And so, for example, the 5th general standard of the course design rubric deals with course activities and learner interaction, which is something that research has shown is important. Just engaging students ultimately is helping them to learn more and get more out of their education. I also want to plug our Quality Matters research library, which is open to the public. We have over 1,300 research references similar to those ones that I shared with you in the earlier slides. And so I want to go and explain a little bit about one of my favorite resources in the past few years. This is a voluminous meta-study that tackles the big question of what works online. And it's a book by George Siemens, Dragan Gasevich, and Shane Athabasca. And I want to say it's maybe like 500 pages long, but it's definitely worth looking through. And what this book did, it's from 2015, and they looked at a total of 339 studies on online education and basically trying to find what works. And they pared down to the 37 of those studies that they felt were the best. I just want to share with you this one quote that I feel is very inspiring. They said that our results indicate that distance education, when properly planned, designed, and supported by the appropriate mix of technology and pedagogy, is equivalent to, or in certain scenarios, more effective than traditional face-to-face classroom instruction. So this highlights the importance of instructional design and the active role that institutions can play in providing support structures for instructors and learners. So I think trying to be better, trying to look at the research of what is working is ultimately going to help us all. These points in the bullet points on the slide are big takeaways from the studies that were looked at in this book. The first one is that there ought to be institutional support for instructors and students. That's very helpful. There needs to be academic support for the students, so they are not, just out there on their own on the other side of their laptop screen or phone screen in many cases. Problem-based learning is something that has been shown by the research to work. Basically, that open-ended problems are given to students for them to solve. And it's not just factual information that's being presented to them. Planned interaction that's designed into the course is very important and something that works well. It cannot be as spontaneous as in a face-to-face type of learning situation. Of course, you know that so much of online learning nowadays is asynchronous, so that interaction has to be planned and designed into the course where students, see what the plan is before it actually takes place. And then lastly, using not just one type of interaction, but 2 or 3 types of interaction, student to student, student to instructor, or student to content. A lot of times in the research, the students are not as positive about the student-to-student interaction that may be required or suggested in their courses, but it's important that there be at least a couple of different types of interaction in order to help students learn in the course and to really boost the quality of the online and blended courses. All right, well, that's all of my prepared remarks. I am going to let you know that we are very happy at Quality Matters to talk about the research that we've found, to share that with anyone. So I'm just going to leave this up there for a second so people can see our website, and then also my email address is there for you. And I just encourage you to contact me at any time. Okay, at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll start my video here, and just wanted to see if anybody has any kind of comments that they want to share or just questions for me.
Hi, Barbara. I'm wondering if you would be willing to share your PowerPoint with us. It looked like you had a lot of great links in there, but of course we couldn't reach them through this. I did see the Quality Matters, but you had a lot of articles and looked like all kinds of things that we might want to be able to find.
Okay, great. Well, I went ahead and put a link in there that brings you to a page on the Quality Matters website. And on that page is the link to the PowerPoint.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll just type my information here. No questions? Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you all very much and encourage you to reach out to me and also to let me know. You may not have this at the top of your mind, but if there's other research related to online learning and quality assurance that you would be interested in, please let me know. Reach out and we'll see how we can help.
All right, well, I just wanted to thank Barbara again for her presentation. And just to note to you, my institution also subscribes to Quality Matters and we use the rubric. So thanks for all your work there. And thank you to everyone who attended the presentation. We hope to see you in some more in the following weeks. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.